Hi, this is Amanda de Cadenet, and I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to me and the conversations I'm having, and most importantly, if you want to support this podcast, the best way for you to do it is to sign up for my Substack. That is where I share the more personal lessons I'm learning, extra wisdom from my guests, plus the tools I'm gathering from the various teachers in my life. The way you get access to all of this is by heading over to www.amandadecadenet.substack.com and just sign up. Put your email in. It's totally free. So head over to www.amandadecadenet.substack.com. Hello, I'm Amanda de Cadenet, and welcome back to The Conversation. Today, I am so excited to share this interview with Jillian Turecki. Jillian is a certified relationship coach, teacher, and the host of the Jillian on Love podcast. For over 20 years, she's been helping people transform their relationships, not just with their partners, but most importantly, with themselves. Now, she's sharing those experiences and insights in her highly anticipated book, which I have read. It is incredible. The book is called It Begins With You, an inspiring guide on love, self-awareness, and building the kind of relationships we all deserve. I have to say, there are a lot of people out there on the interweb talking about all kinds of relationship dynamics, and Jillian is someone who I trust, I refer people to, and who has helped me personally many, many times. So this is the second time I've had the good fortune to interview Jillian, and I'm really excited to share this interview with you. Jillian, welcome to the podcast. So I just want to start by saying this is the second time I've had the pleasure of interviewing you. I am such a big fan of yours. Your work and your insight and your wisdom has been personally really helpful for me for many, many years. You know, I've sent people your way. I always tell anyone that listen to Jillian. She's incredible. She knows what she's on about. She's not one of these like fake Instagram self-helpy people. She's really rooted in real wisdom and tools. And I'm so excited that you have a book out because more people will be able to access the incredible work that you do. And why did you decide to write a book?
Well, first of all, just thank you so much for your kind words. I loved our last chat, and I love how we've, stayed connected throughout the years. So I really appreciate that a lot. Why did I decide to write the book? Years ago, I felt this urge to sort of share whatever I've learned in writing. And so I started, this was many years ago, like almost 10 years ago. And I started a blog and I started a newsletter, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, I think I want to write a book, but what is it going to be? And then I was like, okay, well, if I were just going to leave people with like 5 to 10 lessons that I have learned from working with people so closely on their lives for so many years, and then the lessons that I learned, like these hard lessons, these real truths and realities about love and relationships that I feel you have to face. And you have to understand and you have to integrate into your life. And then, all the stars aligned and it was like, okay, guess I'm writing a book. And here we are.
It's really exciting. So the title of your book is It Begins With You. And that's a very brave title because most people don't want to accept that that is the truth. They want a guide to how do you get other people to do what you want them to do so that you can have the relationship you want. And I agree with you. It does begin with you, right? It has to start with us. But that's a really hard concept to share with people, right? Because loving yourself is so vague. Like, what the fuck does that mean? And how do you do that, right? So yeah. I guess my question for you is, what started your journey to self-discovery and how did you begin to love yourself?
Okay. So you're right. What the fuck does it mean to actually love yourself? And I believe in my definition, in the way that I describe it in the book and the way that I just describe it in general is really just a self-acceptance. And I know there's a lot of people walking around who think that they accept themselves, but they actually don't. And they are repressing parts of themselves, and they are very mean to themselves, and they speak horribly to themselves, or they're in relationships where they don't know their value and they don't know their worth. And so they're in relationships that reflect that belief that they have about themselves. And so when it comes to self-love, someone can have a really healthy degree, a healthy amount of confidence, let's say in one area of their life. Maybe they have a lot of confidence in their work life. But when it comes to letting themselves be loved or wanting love, and in their interpersonal relationships, more specifically their romantic relationships, there's evidence that they don't see themselves as enough. Now, here's the thing. To be human is to struggle with your value. And there isn't a single person who does not in some way question their enoughness, their worthiness. Now, there's a spectrum here, right? Because there are people who really do feel a lot more confident. Their self-esteem is much healthier than other people's self-esteem.
I don't really know those people, but I know they exist.
Yes, exactly. But, there are people who do have just like healthier self-esteem than others, right? Like not everyone falls in the same category in terms of their self-esteem. And so I think the journey of loving yourself is, can you hold yourself in high regard, despite the fact that there are things about yourself that you feel ambivalent towards? Can you hold yourself in high regard, even though there are things about yourself that you wish you could change? Can you accept yourself, even though you are not perfect? And so the journey of self-acceptance is that it does get easier for a lot of people with age. Because I think that with wisdom, we start to recognize none of us are perfect. All of us are struggling with something. And that the time wasted on not feeling good enough is a lot of time wasted.
I mean, ultimately, what you're talking about, though, is a very deep reframing and almost rewiring. Because for people who do not have a high sense of self-esteem, which is a lot of people, as you said, it's on a spectrum, reframing that for me has been a life journey. It's ongoing, right? And I think you're right. It has gotten easier with age, but it's so difficult for people to grasp a concept of how do you do that? You're talking about acceptance, right? An acceptance of yourself. And I'm thinking of internal family systems, Richard Schwartz, who really pioneered the perspective that we have these parts of us that we've put away because it wasn't valued, it wasn't appreciated, it was ashamed, it was shut down for whatever reason. And that until we fully integrate these banished parts of ourselves, we're never going to be living fully and completely. But the process through which an individual can do this is what is so tricky.
One way in which a person can learn to raise their self-esteem and therefore to be able to look in the mirror and feel more proud of themselves than they do feel shame, for example, is to do hard things, to do things that actually challenge you, to do the things that you're afraid of. This is how we teach children to develop confidence in themselves. It's the first time that they take the bus alone to school or the subway. Oh, wow, I can do this. I can do this thing that seems hard. Growing is hard. When you're growing and when you're overcoming obstacles, it's not a fun ride. I've yet to meet anyone who at the other side of really putting their all into overcoming an obstacle did not feel some sense of fulfillment and accomplishment. And that sense of fulfillment and accomplishment gives them a stronger sense of who they are. It gives them a stronger sense of self. And then the stronger their sense of self, the more that they feel integrated with that sense of self. The more integrated they feel, the higher their self-esteem. Another way is, and I talk about this in the book about climbing the mountain. Like everyone has different mountains in front of them, whether it's their relationship, whether it's parenting, whether it's work, whatever it is.
Or all of them.
Whether it's all of them. It's all of them.
Yeah.
It's like, it's
at different stages of life, right? It's
at different
ones.
stages
Yeah.
of life. Exactly. And then another thing is give back, join community and give back. That actually raises your self-esteem. And this is certainly not a diss on anyone. I've been in this position. If we were to become very consumed with our not enoughness, we are essentially too consumed with ourselves.
Yes. And that's where you get these very narcissistic experiences of people who are supposedly doing the work, but they're just hyper fixated on themselves. Those people are exhausting.
Completely exhausting.
I know some of those.
Yes, I do too. And so we can't learn to really, quote unquote, love ourselves in a vacuum. We need to have the reflection of everyone else's experience of us reflecting back to us. So every time we have a positive interaction with someone, we feel a deeper connection and we're seeing ourselves through the eyes of others. So community is a really, really important way. Giving back, creating community, whatever your thing is, but anything that makes you feel like you're doing something
of
good
value,
for someone
purpose.
else. Yeah, purpose, value, meaning. These things increase our self-esteem hugely. And so, yes, the parts work, all of that, deeper work and therapy for sure. But I have found in my research that that's actually not enough. You have to do things so that you are putting that stronger part in charge and
almost like building the muscle of that, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I love that. And I just want to go back to what you said about being in community and needing other people to reflect where we're at. Some people think I'm not going to get into a relationship until I've healed. And from my experience, there are parts of myself that could not be seen by me until I got into the relationship. It was only the intimate, romantic, sexual intimacy that allowed these parts of myself to come up. They never came up in friendships, but when I got in the romantic relationship, I was like, oh boy. What do you say to people who are still thinking that they have more work to do before they get into a relationship, as opposed to looking at the relationship as almost the playground for growth?
I see the relationship, you use the playground. I think that's an amazing metaphor. I would add, it's also the classroom. It's the classroom for growth. A lot of people think they're totally healed and then they get into the relationship and they're like, fuck, why do I feel this way? It's like, because this is really the work. Look, are there people who need to take a time out from relationships to do some work on themselves? Absolutely. But you're never going to be 100% healed, have the most perfect self-esteem, and you're always going to be vulnerable in a relationship to some degree, right? It all depends on what kind of stuff you need. I wrote the book, It Begins With You, because ultimately it's like, well, it does begin with you. This is the work that you actually have to do. If you want to see change in your love life, if you want to see change in your partner, and part of it is, by changing you, you're going to start to see some major changes in your environment that you're going to be very happy about. So
you're really going to see stuff that doesn't work.
Yes, well, exactly. Or it's going to reveal what you absolutely need to see.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I certainly have struggled with, and I know a lot of other people have, is we don't really have a lot of examples of healthy, mature relationships. And people don't have many frames of reference. So how do you describe a healthy relationship?
Yes. So a healthy relationship doesn't mean that the relationship is perfect. And it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be things that two people need to work on. But fundamentally, a healthy relationship is one in which there is trust and respect. And when there's trust and respect, there's emotional safety. Physical safety, I feel like I shouldn't even have to say that. That goes without say. But the emotional safety is trust and respect. And it's a foundation. And a lot of people, they rush into relationships and they haven't built that foundation. So as soon as they're met with some sort of life obstacle, whatever that obstacle is, the relationship starts to fall apart. What I have observed is that the healthiest couples I know and the healthiest couples I've worked with, when there's conflict, when they have a fight, when they argue, there's no one saying, I need space and pulling away and pulling that shit. There's two people who are just like, okay, let's talk about this. Let's figure it out. And if we can't figure it out, maybe we go and get third-party help, or maybe we just agree to disagree. But it's us against the problem. That is, to me, probably one of the greatest markers of what makes a healthy relationship. There's teamwork, there's collaboration, there's friendship, and they trust each other and they respect each other greatly. Now, they may have to work on other things, like maybe they have to work on their sex life, or maybe they have to work on certain things with parenting. It's not perfect. But if you have that, that's what I would say goes under the very large umbrella of what makes a relationship, quote unquote, healthy.
Having a shared language and understanding is also, I've found, really important and difficult.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's a very wise thing that you said. Yes. And love means something different.
Exactly.
For everyone. You trust in your ability as a couple to get over obstacles. You don't feel so fragile. A relationship is in trouble when it feels so fragile that it can't handle obstacles.
But that's down to the individual, right? This comes back to the title of your book, because for me, when I've been really activated in my abandonment wound, every argument feels like the end of the relationship. Now,
Yes.
It wasn't, but that's just someone with a wound who's perceiving it that way. And so you're reacting from a place of damage. It's hard to build on that when you have two individuals, both of whom are stuck in their childhood patterns.
Absolutely. So now what we're getting to is obviously the nuance of all of this. And this is why we have to know what are the things that we bring to the table, know your insecurities, and have an understanding of how your insecurities could easily sabotage a relationship.
Yeah.
And then work on that and choose someone who you can work on that with. So you're taking full responsibility, but at the same time, we all have our insecurities and we talk about it, but we also have to work on it. So knowing your insecurities, knowing the things that you could bring to a relationship that could easily destroy a really good bond. It's important. Look, I always say the key to a great relationship is dependent on two things: who you choose and how you choose to show up.
Yeah, man, because it can mess you up to pick someone who you are not compatible with. And I just want to say, as someone who's had this kind of disorganized attachment and had a significant abandonment wound, picking people who are avoidant is a goddamn nightmare. Boy, you can spend, a big chunk of your life in this cycle if you're not careful.
Yes, you can. And so that's why I spent a pretty big amount of time on helping people how to actually choose well for them. It doesn't mean that there's no perfect person coming into your life who's going to make everything okay for you. You're still going to have to work on your stuff. And it's not a but, and who you choose matters.
Yeah. Have you ever had couples come in and you can just clearly see this is not going to work? And what do you do? What do you say?
Well, I don't say that right away to them. When I've worked with couples, I'm very, very direct. I'm compassionate, but I'm very direct. I tell the truth always. I tell the truth how I see it. And I've just said, I don't think that the two of you are right for each other. I think that you would be much happier apart and in different relationships.
Yeah, I'm sure you can see clearly.
Yes. I can see things that they can't see, because I'm not emotionally, involved.
I know that you went through a really difficult divorce at the same time that your mom was dying.
Yes.
And that, I'm sure, was a really pivotal time for you in your own life. Would you say that your relationship now reflects the ideals that are more aligned and in practice with what you teach?
So I'm not in a romantic relationship at the moment. But is that what you're asking? Yeah. No, I'm not. No. But I have been since my divorce. And yes, they've all been in alignment with the ideals that I teach. But they just weren't, I don't know. I decided to spend the rest of my life with someone is a very big decision. Nothing was wrong with those relationships. Nothing was dysfunctional. It was actually really lovely and pleasant, just not what I want long term.
God, that must be really interesting to teach what you teach and then date. Are you able to put that aside and just be a woman on a date, or is all of your teaching going through your head?
I'm 100% a woman on a date. Yeah.
Wait, Jillian, how do you do that?
look, I'm a woman on a date, but I'm a different woman who I was, many years ago. I'm checking in with how I feel in my body. I'm checking in to see if I like the person. I'm not trying to get the person to be into me. I'm just totally myself. And then, I just don't have any real nerves or stock in it. It's just like, am I enjoying my time with this person? That's it. And then if there's something that I don't like or I think that's weird, I have no hesitation in me just bringing it up and just saying, look, this is a concern of mine. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. I'm not going to immediately write someone off just because something comes up, but I am going to bring it up and see how it's handled.
Have you found that you're attracted to a different type of person since you obviously have all this awareness?
Yes, 100%. I don't want to paint a picture that I have this dysfunctional relationship past. I really don't. There's been some dysfunctional and there's been beautiful, lovely relationships. So I would say that the ones that turned out to be very painful for me, they were avoidant and sort of just very charismatic.
Well, the avoidants tend to be.
Yeah. Life of the party type of vibe. I don't go for that anymore. Give me stoic and grounded. That's what I'm interested in. And a sense of humor. If you don't have a sense of humor, you have no future with me.
It's interesting because men get a bad rap. And I have to say that I know a lot of incredible women who check all the boxes, who are single. And
yes.
They're having a hard time finding men who are a good match for them. I'm wondering what you found in the dating pool. Are you finding that there are more men who are evolved and have done work on themselves?
There's great men out there, but you have to choose them, number one. And a lot of women, what I've found is that, and I understand this, I've got nothing but empathy and compassion for this. They're so guarded. Their walls are so up. And so that great guy, when he's with her, even if she's gorgeous and smart, he feels like there's no vulnerability there. So he feels like he can't connect with her. And so you have to have some level of open-heartedness and open-mindedness if you're going to get out there and meet someone good for you. I had someone send me pictures from her wedding day, and I was coaching her in a group of singles. This was 2 years ago. She had just met this guy. She had just met him. And she was like, I don't know. I don't know if he's good looking. He's not usually the guy that I go for. I know that this is a shallow thing to say, kind of like getting the ick. But then she would describe something else as well. He's just really, really present, does not take himself seriously. He's pursuing me like a man. He's very interested in me. He's setting up dates. She would say all these things, but then afterwards she would say, but I don't know if I like how he looks. And I got really firm with her. And I got firm with her because I had permission to. She wanted that from me. And I said, you are continuing to date this guy. And I don't care if you need to not make it sexual for a little while, but you are going to continue to see this guy, because she had a fear of commitment that she didn't even recognize, but you could tell because she was dating these guys who were non-committal, and then she would have these casual hookups. That was her pattern. And what she was describing in this man, he's present, doesn't play games. He seems very confident in himself, doesn't have an ego around all this. And he seems to really, really be nuts about you. And they're married now.
What shifted? I know exactly what she's talking about. I mean, I had periods of my life where if a guy was too nice, I was just like, oh, no thanks.
Well, we don't want too nice. We don't want too nice.
Right, but
should we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that, because there is something, although I do feel like there was so much unhealed in me that unless someone was problematic, I wasn't attracted to them.
Exactly.
Like your client was saying, it's like, yeah, all great, but I don't want to have sex with them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So 2 things. One is we really underestimate how important it is to be with someone who's nice to you, for God's sake. I mean, that
basic,
really needs to
right?
It's like really fucking basic.
Yeah.
Like someone who's really nice to you and respects you. But what's the turnoff is the person who's really nice to you, who's just a doormat. Like you can be a total bitch to them and they're just nice to you. Then what that registers in the female nervous system is you are not safe because if you're taking my garbage, I can never rely on you. So too nice is not good, but you still want nice. You want someone who's kind. So I pushed her, and I said, you need to really have the experience of being on dates with someone who's present with you and isn't playing some game with you. And you're not playing some game with them where you're weaponizing your sexuality. Like take sex off the table and see what's going on. And they kissed one night. It was like, I don't know, like the fourth date. And she was like, wow, that was an amazing kiss.
Wow.
And then she had a few hiccups of like, I don't know, maybe my family won't be into them or he's not that good looking. Meanwhile, he's totally good looking. They're actually aligned.
They're not mismatched.
They're not mismatched. I knew it was the mind playing tricks on her. And so I had to force her. And she fell in love quickly and hard with him because of that. So you kind of have to sometimes give the person a chance. Chemistry can grow a lot more easily for women than it can men. I hate to say it, but it's just a fact. When the person is showing them, I can really be myself, or he's taking care of the dates, there's some leadership. These are aphrodisiacs for women.
They
so
really
even
are.
If he doesn't, so even if he doesn't look exactly how you would want, ideally your man to look, if he's exhibiting these other traits, it can be a big turn on for women.
It's interesting. I'm curious what you think about gender roles. I'm really aware that men are confused, and certainly young men and boys are very confused about what their roles are, what their place is. And I think that overall, what we're talking about as an aphrodisiac for women, what women are attracted to are these traits that are typically very male.
Oh, this is a huge topic. So a large part of my work, let's just say I'm working with a heterosexual woman. A lot of my work with heterosexual women in particular is don't be so desperate for love that you're willing to lower your standards. And I think that there's a conundrum here. And whether this is biology, nature, or nurture, women do tend to value, all women, on a higher level connection than men do. Men will value more of their freedom or their independence and whatnot. And women, we're nurturers, right? So connection is very important to us. Why is it typically easier for a man to get over a breakup than it is for a woman? Now, of course, that's not the case all the time, but there is a stereotype to that and there's some truth to that, right? So because even if he's hurt and he loves the woman, he gets to be free again and he values freedom so highly.
Why?
Well, it depends who you ask. There are some people who say it's the role of testosterone in the body versus the role of estrogen in the body. Some people would say, well, that's how men are conditioned. But men and women are different. So that's a longer, conversation. Yeah. But so when men in a romantic relationship or when they're focusing on their purpose and meaning, their testosterone goes up. And so they're more in an independent zone. That is a very comfortable place for most men, not all, but for most men to reside. And so once they return to that freedom, it's almost like they get their mojo back. And when they get their mojo back, then they want to kind of share that mojo and they want to get into another relationship. With women, what tends to happen is that more women than men after a breakup will take longer to get back in the saddle because they're stewing in the feelings of unworthiness and I wasn't chosen. This is just one of the dramas of being a woman. And so she gets very caught up in that. And so my work with women in particular, and I've done this with men too, of course, but my work with women is like, enjoy the freedom more. I want you to embrace the freedom. Don't go into that narrative if you're not enough. Like maybe he's not enough. And so self-esteem and women, this is a big, big narrative. Now, when it comes to gender roles, so I'm helping women do that, to really embrace their freedom and their independence. But then the pendulum can swing too far. Whereas then women think, well, I don't need a man for anything. Now, contrary to what some people believe, men have a sense of self-esteem as well. Men want to feel enough as well. Men can be very hard on themselves as well. Men can so easily feel like failures. Whereas for women, it's more, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not chosen. For men is, I'm a failure. These are just the more common narratives. And so if boys are thinking, well, I'm not needed, then I'm not good enough. And so that's not a good thing. I consider myself to be feminist, but that does not mean that men don't have value and that they're not needed. They are needed very much. And even if you don't date them, you still need men in your life. It's important.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about when a man is focused on himself or a person is focused on their purpose, that their testosterone rises, because actually when a man is in a home and is a father and is a husband and is part of that community, would that mean that his testosterone is going down because he's not focused on purpose? Or maybe that is his purpose.
Well, what it means is, and there's lots of research that's actually happening right now. It just means his estrogen is higher. And that happens to men anyway, as they get older, their estrogen goes up, and for women, our estrogen declines. So it depends. It depends if he finds meaning in it.
100%.
100%. But a man who has no purpose in life is actually a very dangerous guy. That's not a guy you want to be in a relationship with. He feels so terribly about himself, and the hormonal imbalance that comes from that, just like the hormone imbalance that comes from overachieving and the burnout from that, is very, very real. So if there's anyone listening right now who's feeling like I've started dating someone, or I'm in a relationship with someone, all of a sudden he's having a hard time with arousal and maintaining an erection, and almost always, I'm talking 99.9% of the time, what's going on is something for him psychologically that is specifically related to him and who he believes he's supposed to be in the world.
Interesting. Yeah. Really interesting. I want to just go back, which is, how did you get to Tony Robbins and why did you decide to work with him?
Yeah. So the day after my husband left and my mom was dying, I was sitting outside with my dog, and my neighbor, who had become a friend, who was also a coach, saw me, and she sat down next to me, and she had no idea what was going on, but she saw in my whole body language that something terrible had happened, because I'd felt horrible, right? You can see it, And so we started talking, and she's like, I think maybe listening to some Tony Robbins might help you. And at that point, I was very heavily entrenched in the yoga and meditation spiritual world, but not in the personal development world. I went to his events and I thought, this is just unfucking believable. And then I listened to his stuff, and listening to his stuff helped me get out of bed in the morning. I was in a very, very deep depression. It was a very, very dark time.
For listeners to have some context, could you just give a little snapshot of what had happened?
So we had a difficult 2-year marriage, and then he left out of the blue. He broke up with me on the morning that I had a miscarriage, and he did it over the phone. And my mom had been given a couple of months to live. And I was 40. And I had this belief system. It's so ridiculous. But back then I had this belief system that like, oh, no one's going to want me because I'm fucking 40, which is like really funny when I think about it now. But, that's the societal pressure.
Yes.
But it was just everything. It was a very, very dark time. And so thank God I have a dog, and the dog, I had to walk the dog, and I forced myself to teach yoga. But otherwise I just, if I didn't have to leave bed, I wouldn't. And listening to him gave me some purpose and gave me some inspiration. And then I was learning about relationships, and I just thought, this is it. This is what I have to do.
That was just 10 years ago.
Yes.
Jillian, what you have built in such a short time is incredible. I remember when you were launching your podcast and it just like took off. I wonder, have you thought about what it is about your perspective that people connect with so much?
I will say is that 14 years before that, I'd been teaching yoga, and I worked with a lot of couples and a lot of people with their pain, their physical pain and their emotional pain, and how that's tied into that. So I leveraged an audience that I already had. What is it that people resonate with? There's a combination of keeping it very real, but also delivered with a lot of compassion. I really try to think very critically and not just go along with what everyone else is saying. And I wonder if that perspective is something that is refreshing for people.
Well, I think there's an authenticity, isn't there, that people pick up on. And I think, and an intuitiveness, I think people intuitively feel what frequency people are on. And there is a realness to you that is really palpable. In fact, I actually want to talk about intuition because you talk about that in your book. You say that inside of you is a wise voice that is certain and certain of its value. Call it your inner voice, your intuition, your higher self. And your higher self knows what is best for you. Your higher self is your most authentic self.
We're walking around burdened by all these beliefs that we have, these rules that we have about how we should be, how everyone else should be. One way to look at it is just like we walk around with all these neuroses, and all they do is cover up the truth of really who we are. Inside of everyone is something very powerful and something very capable. When you're working on yourself, the point is not to fix yourself. The point is, can we just brush aside some of the muck, this conditioning, these beliefs, these habits?
Peel the layers, peel the onion.
Peel the layers. And this has been the most powerful reframe that I learned from my teachers is it's not who you are, it's your habits. And I find it very, very useful when you think of it as this is just a habit that I have. It's a habit.
It's not who I am. It is a pattern.
It's a pattern. It's a habit. It's not who you are. Exactly. And the habit, we get reinforcement from it. We get some of our needs met from it in some way or another.
Yes. How is it serving you?
Yes.
How is it serving you? I mean, there's so many things, workaholism was the last one for me. I got sober from drugs and alcohol at 22. And then I went through, sex, shopping, money, fame. I went through all the stuff,
Yeah.
And the last one was workaholism because it's so socially acceptable and you get validated for, the busier you are, the more you achieve. People are like, oh my God, that's great. You're doing well. Meanwhile, you're dying inside because you're just overextended in every single area. And that's one of those things that serves you. It's really hard to change the patterns that are still feeding you in some way.
Yeah, 100%. It's really hard. And part of it is just understanding the needs that are being met and then helping someone to figure out how they can meet needs in better ways that are more empowering.
What do you hope that readers will take away from your book?
I'm hoping that they actually feel very empowered by it. It begins with you. It's not about this is your fault. It's you can actually create change. You're not broken. Your childhood does not define you. Your past does not define you. You are with tools. You can actually create change and get more of what it is that you want in life and in love.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jillian. I just love talking to you. Thank you so much for listening to that fantastic episode. Please like, subscribe, and all that business. It does really help the podcast. And most importantly, come join me on Substack. Substack is where I'm showing the video of the entire episode that you just listened to. So find me on Substack if you want to dig in a bit deeper to the subjects that we talked about in this episode. See you there.